Alright guys, so after rejecting the Hamas-accepted ceasefire from yesterday, Israel has now officially launched their invasion of Rafah, which as a reminder is on the southern tip of the Gaza Strip, right there on the border with Egypt, and it's also where over 1 million Palestinians, 600,000 or more of them being children, have essentially been stuffed into a giant refugee camp as Israel has made the rest of the Gaza Strip unlivable. And so we got a couple of videos that I'm going to show you guys here just real quick of what this looked like. Here we have a video that was taken from the Egyptian side of the crossing, and you can see some of the explosions going off there in Rafah. We also have a couple more videos of explosives here. This one, I mean, just showing the intense airstrikes that were coming in ahead of this ground incursion. We have another one here of what looks like a Israeli IDF tank operator who, I guess just for the fun of it, decided to go and run over this I Heart Gaza sign. I mean, clearly must have been some Hamas militant under that sign, right? Couldn't be that they're just wantonly destroying everything that they can in Gaza, because this isn't actually about attacking Hamas, but there you go, destroying this, I Heart Gaza sign that's right there across the border with Egypt. We also have here confirmation that it looks like pretty quickly they successfully took over this checkpoint or took over the border crossing with Egypt, which now means, you have potentially another point of entry for some of the limited aid that has been getting into Gaza because of Israel's blockading of the aid, and now one more of these crossings is potentially in jeopardy now. So in this video we have an Israeli tank operator, it looks like, just showing us around this crossing that they have taken over. Now, just as a reminder for you guys, this was previously something that Joe Biden said was going to be a red line. I mean, here from Politico, Biden warns of red line for Israel over Rafah. So he said, "We cannot have another 30,000 more Palestinians dead," Biden said in an interview with MSNBC. Asked whether an invasion of Rafah in the south of Gaza on the border with Egypt was a red line, he said, "It is a red line." Okay? I mean, he also went on to say that Benjamin Netanyahu is hurting Israel more than helping Israel. I mean, that's true. In his approach to the war against Hamas in Gaza, he also said that he must pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost as a consequence of the actions that he's taken. Now, I mean, listen, there's a couple things here. First off, obviously humiliating, once again, that you say something is a red line and then it's not a red line, because in order to have a real red line, you need to be able to use your leverage as the president in order to enforce consequences for violating those red lines. So if you have a blank check policy when it comes to Israel and you're never going to have any consequences for them, then there is no such thing as a red line. And I remember saying this when I covered these statements all the way back in early March. It's the same principle that applies right now. You said this was a red line, so where are you at now? I mean, I'm going to show you a video of Biden's statement from just earlier today here, again, affirming his support for Israel even after they violated this grave red line. And the other thing that I want to mention about this specific statement down here, he must pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost as a consequence of the actions taken. This is similar to other statements to me of Biden, for example, saying Israel is engaging in indiscriminate bombing. He said that before. We've heard other similar statements from U.S. officials in the Biden administration. Israel is not taking civilian lives into account enough. Even when it came specifically to Rafah, they said the same thing. They were opposed to Israel's Rafah plan because they said Israel is not taking into account the over 1 million civilians that are currently there enough for our liking. Now, the reason I think that these statements are important is because this is an admission, without actually outright admitting it, that Israel is just brazenly targeting, killing civilians. If they're not, going out of their way, or if they were going out of their way to just target Hamas, and they were doing everything that they possibly can to avoid civilians, then why would you need to make this kind of a statement? They need to pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost. In other words, Israel is killing too many innocent civilians. Why are they killing too many innocent civilians? That's the question that would be a follow-up to this kind of a statement that Biden is never asked, or he never has to grapple with, right? I mean, it's the same thing with the same principle with the building of the floating pier off of the coast of Gaza. Why do you need to build a floating pier off the coast of Gaza if Israel isn't blocking the aid? Right? That's a tacit admission that they are blocking the aid, right? But they can't come out and say that they're openly, blocking the aid from getting in. They can't openly come out and say that Israel is committing war crimes, because if they are blocking the aid and they are committing war crimes, which they are, but if they admit that then they're openly admitting that the weapons that we're giving to Israel are totally illegal. They're illegal under the Leahy Law, and they're also illegal under the Foreign Assistance Act. So this is why you see this bizarre rhetoric where they're simultaneously saying Israel has prosecuted this war perfectly and entirely within the bounds of international law, but also maybe they should kill less civilians, also maybe they should stop blocking medicine and food and water from getting in. I mean, it's just talking out of both sides of your mouth. Now we get to Joe Biden's actual statement today. So this was broadly a statement in support of Israel. This wasn't him specifically commenting on the Rafah invasion, but it was from today, and this was after the Rafah invasion had already begun. And so it gives you a perspective in terms of where his mindset is at right now.
My commitment to the safety of the Jewish people, the security of Israel, and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad, even when we disagree. My administration is working around the clock to free remaining hostages, just as we have freed hostages already.
Okay, so, I mean, again, you can't say that you have any red lines if you're then, after they violate those red lines, going to come out and say that your support for them is totally ironclad. That's number one, right? And the irony, as you know, some of you may have picked up down here, is that this statement was given because it's Holocaust Remembrance, day, right? And so they were having this whole ceremony that was, underway, and he was giving this kind of a speech. We also have other videos that I'm going to show you from this same speech with Biden, as well as from Mike Johnson as well, who just said the most insane, the most insane shit I've ever heard in regards to the campus protests, literally comparing them to the Holocaust. But again, it's a deep irony here on Holocaust Remembrance Day, right? You hear the phrase never forget often. And the reason that we're never supposed to forget the Holocaust is because we're supposed to learn the lessons from the Holocaust. That genocide, no matter what its form, no matter who it's committed against, is always wrong. But instead, he's doing the opposite of that. He's using the Holocaust, he's using Holocaust Remembrance Day in order to justify continuing to arm and fund and support an ongoing genocide. That's apparently the lesson that he took from the Holocaust. Now, the other thing that he said in this towards the end, we're going to continue to support them to get the hostages back. And then he even references, we've already gotten some of the hostages back. I'm sorry, Joe. How did those hostages get returned to Israel? I mean, just as a reminder here for everybody, the idea that this military invasion of Rafah is the best path to get the hostages safely returned to Israel is delusional. It's insane. Okay? The hostage deal, or the ceasefire deal that Hamas agreed to yesterday, as a part of that deal, involved the return of all of the hostages. That's how you get the hostages back, is a ceasefire deal. Israel rejected that deal. And so just as a reminder in terms of what's happened with the hostages, I mean, here from Prem, 105 were freed via that temporary ceasefire agreement back in November. 4 were released by Hamas. 3 with white flags were killed by the IDF. And then there were 3 rescue missions where 1 hostage was killed, 1 soldier was saved, 2 hostages were saved, and at least 74 people were killed, and an unknown amount had been killed in Hamas captivity amid indiscriminate attacks on Gaza. And that's something we've heard very frequently from some of the hostages that were released back to Israel, is they come back and they say one of the biggest things they were fearful of is the relentless bombing from Israel on or near the locations that they were being held at. So we don't even know at this point how many hostages have been killed by Israel as a part of their military operations, but we do know that they have killed more hostages via military operations than they have saved via military operations. So again, if your priority is the hostages, then get a ceasefire deal. Don't reject the ceasefire deal and then go and invade and bomb the place where you think the hostages are being held. I mean, definitely not in the best interest of even the hostages themselves, let alone the countless civilians that are trapped inside of Rafah. So here is just a couple reminders in terms of what the international community, what aid organizations have been saying would come as a result from a Rafah invasion. So this is from UNICEF. There is nowhere safe to go for the 600,000 children of Rafah. With hundreds of thousands of children in Rafah injured, sick, malnourished, traumatized, or living with a disability, UNICEF calls for children to not be forcibly relocated and the vital infrastructure on which children rely on to be protected. Israel doing the exact opposite of that. There are 600,000 children in Rafah. Many of them, as they point out here, are sick, they're malnourished, they're traumatized, some have disabilities. The idea that you're going to be able to ever conduct a military operation in Rafah with this many people there in a giant refugee camp that is somehow going to protect civilian life is delusional. It was never going to be able to happen. And yet they're going forward with it. Now we also had this, from the United Nations, Rafah operation could result in a slaughter, according to a top UN official. We also have here Amnesty International, and as well as the UN chief Gutierrez, who has warned that an assault on Rafah, where more than 1.4 million people are sheltering, would be a strategic mistake, a political calamity, and a humanitarian nightmare. Amnesty International called on the international community to pressure Israel to immediately halt its ground operations in Rafah and ensure unfettered access for humanitarian aid. The group's senior director of research, advocacy, and policy and campaigns, Erica, said that Israel's long-threatened large-scale ground operation in Rafah would further compound, quote, the unspeakable suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. We also, as I talked about yesterday, had the World Food Program director, Cindy McCain, yes, the wife of the now dead John McCain, who came out and openly said that northern Gaza is now in a full-blown famine. Not approaching a famine, not on the brink of famine. It is a famine in the north of Gaza, and she said it is rapidly spreading south. Now, what do you think is going to happen now that we have the Kerem Shalom crossing that has been shut off in recent days? Now we have part of the crossing with Egypt in the south that's cut off as of right now. What do you think that's going to do to the famine that is now full-blown in the north and rapidly spreading south as you continue with a military operation in the south? How do you think that that's going to impact this situation? It could not get more horrific than this. We also have reports like this. The unprecedented destruction of housing in Gaza hasn't been seen since World War II. So, again, there's nowhere for people in Rafah to go. There's nothing left. They've destroyed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of apartment blocks. They've destroyed, a vast majority of the civilian infrastructure to make life possible in Gaza, which was already difficult before October 7th, and now has just been made into arguably the world's worst humanitarian crisis. I've seen stats going back to the, famine and starvation that show this is the quickest drop-off into a famine ever in recorded history. You have never had this many people go hungry this quickly, ever, And so, this is a situation that's entirely man-made and has been done throughout the entirety of it with full U.S. support and backing. We also have this onslaught of violence against women and children in Gaza is unacceptable according to UN experts. So, they say here, from Geneva, UN experts today condemned the continued and systematic onslaught of violence committed against Palestinians in Gaza, with most of the victims being women and children over the past 7 months. And they allude to the hundreds of bodies that were found near Nasser and Al-Shifa hospitals, including women and children who were found in these mass graves, with many of them reportedly showing signs of torture and summary executions, as well as people who were potentially buried alive. Okay, and we had other reports of doctors who have been tortured to death at this point. They also pointed out here, this is just so, it's barbaric. It's unbelievable we have allowed it to get to this point. But they say that they also noted that an estimated 63 women, including 37 mothers, are being killed daily, with 17,000 Palestinian children now believed to have been orphaned over the last 7 months. 17,000 orphans created. 63 women, 37 of them mothers, being killed daily. This is what Israel has been referring to as a more low-intensity form of warfare, right? And I'll finish off with this because as we have all of these other reports coming out from UN agencies, from international aid organizations, from other governments around the world, this is how the US media is talking about it. Here from the Wall Street Journal opinion section by the editorial board. Why Israel must take Rafah, the last sanctuary for Hamas's military battalions. So, there you go, guys. It's an absolute nightmare, a nightmare that I was hoping wouldn't come, but at the same time, we always expected that this was going to end up happening. Benjamin Netanyahu has been vehement in saying over and over and over again, we are absolutely going into Rafah. It doesn't matter if there's a ceasefire deal or if there's a hostage deal. None of that matters. We're going into Rafah. We are going to continue with the mission to utterly destroy and flatten Gaza into oblivion. And that's exactly what they've done. I've shown you guys the clips of Israeli politicians, of the Israeli media, how they talk about what exactly their goals are in Gaza. It's been clear from the beginning. We know exactly what they're doing. And this invasion of Rafah is no different. And you have Joe Biden coming out and ironically using Holocaust Remembrance Day to justify an ongoing genocide that he has been fully complicit in. And it doesn't look like he's even capable of changing policy on Israel. I mean, I saw another clip from earlier today that I'll probably cover in a video, later today or tomorrow, where Biden just makes it very explicitly clear that he's fundamentally incapable of changing Israel policy because he does not believe that Palestinians have any material reasons to actually, be angry or upset with Israel. He just seriously believes it's a good versus evil. It's black and white. It's as simple as that. And so Hamas needs to be eliminated. We are going to do everything that we can to support Israel in that. I mean, think about Biden coming out months ago saying the Rafah invasion is a red line. We can't see another 30,000 dead Palestinians. Joe, we're already past that point. Okay, the 33,000 number, I don't know if anybody's been keeping track. It hasn't been updated in months at this point. We're already likely past the 50, 60,000 mark in terms of, civilians who have been killed. We're already past that additional 30,000. And this is only as this Rafah invasion, where 1.4, 1.2 million Palestinians are currently residing, is now beginning. So it's only going to get exponentially worse from here, and it looks like Biden has no interest whatsoever in changing it.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying